You know, we talk a lot about nuclear power, nuclear physics, and nuclear stuff melting your skin off a lot on this show, but I just want to point out that even though nuclear stuff can be scary, you can make it safer. For example, take this wonderful little graph drafted up by Randall Munroe of XKCD. Using real science and real papers from the Canadian government, he figured that if you swam into a used fuel pool in a nuclear reactor at some level before you get to that used fuel, you will actually be safer than you would be from outside radiation than you would be just walking on the street. You're getting almost no radiation from the fuel below, and you're getting almost no radiation, cosmic radiation, and natural sources of radiation from the world above. If you have the right shielding and you know the physics and you do the engineering correctly, you can make nuclear power and nuclear energy remarkably safe. And it's clean, and it's green, and you just have to store all the waste in like a mountain shaft somewhere. Hey you! Welcome to another edition of Footnotes, the companion show to Because Science, where I take all of your comments, questions, and corrections, and then I shield you from the nonsense answers you find on most of the internet. And then I will tell you what's coming up next on this here channel. Hint. Oh. But getting right down to it, in the last episode of Because Science, we are trying to explain the superpowers of a one Dr. Manhattan, who has a PhD but is not a city. I said that Dr. John Osterman is in control basically of the four fundamental forces of nature, and in using those forces in such a way, it can explain all of the powers that we see. Why he blew though, how he can teleport, and why he can disintegrate Rorschach. Remember when that happened? He did. And if you wanted to get technical with it, which I knew you would, you nerds, Dr. Manhattan could cook a chicken by slapping it. All right? It would just have to be trillions of tiny slaps, really fast, using air molecules in oven. But what did you have to say? Douglas Boyd has our first comment, who says, Kyle, if his blueness is a result of the ionization of oxygen and nitrogen in Earth's atmosphere, wouldn't he be a different color on Mars? Or rather, with little to no atmosphere on Mars, would he appear to glow at all? Douglas, yes. I contend that Dr. Manhattan is emitting some kind of radiation, and that is ionizing the air around him, producing a kind of air glow. And if he was in a different atmosphere with a different gas composition, then he would glow in this way, if it's true, a different color. He might be choosing what color he wants to glow. He can do whatever he wants. But if it's air ionization, yes, then he can go into an atmosphere that was, say, mostly neon, and start glowing a very different color. This is what neon signs do. You fill these signs with different kinds of gas and you run electrical current through them, and as the air is ionized and recombines and emits photons, it emits different photons of light. So, in theory, Dr. Manhattan could be whatever color he wanted to. Not just a big blue boy. He could be a purpy, he could be a green bee. He could also be magenta. The 38th Jedi Spartan says, could you do a video explaining how different types of time travel work in their media and which would be the most feasible? I will answer the second part of this question right now. The only feasible kind of time travel is the kind of time travel that we've already accomplished, and that is forwards time travel. It seems that the universe does not want us to travel backwards in time, and by that I mean, it seems like it would break some laws of physics or at least causality, and there'd be too many paradoxes, and it doesn't seem to make any kind of logical sense. We probably won't be able to do it. But if you travel really, 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 really fast, close to the speed of light, you can get to a time dilation where once you stop moving at that speed, the rest of the universe will have aged more than you have aged. This is the only feasible kind of time travel that we know of, and that has actually happened. Astronauts orbiting the Earth at orbital speed aboard the ISS, the International Space Station, are actually aging less than the rest of us. It's a very, very small amount, like nanoseconds, but their biological clocks are still ticking, literally ticking slower than all of ours. So that is the only kind of time travel that really works. You hear me? McFly. Rex says, one of my favorite things regarding Dr. Manhattan is how the original comics imply that he has no free will despite his omnipotence. Yes, in the movie and the comics he says, well, I'm still a puppet, but I can see the strings. And this kind of plays into the determinism that Watchmen was getting at and that I've kind of hinted at in previous episodes of this show, like in the Joker episode. And it says basically this: if you knew the positions, the energies, every single thing about every single single particle in the universe, say you had this crazy supercomputer, if you knew every physical property and all the laws of physics about everything in the universe, then moment to moment you could use that computer to predict what will happen next, because everything is under the laws of physics, and so if you know everything about everything, you can predict the future in theory. If he can control matter down to the quantum level, he knows what the matter is going to do, and therefore he can see his own future, or he can just see the future. He knows what's going to happen, but he still cannot do anything about it because there's no way in that causal chain to insert yourself to make a different choice than you would have made if the conditions were such that you were different before, if you were the same. In my mind, if you think about it scientifically and you apply what we think is going on with the universe, free will kind of just disintegrates. Like Rorschach, remember that? He's dead. Vagard says, "Hey Kyle, love your show. Now that I have your attention, so about these conspiracies going around that you're a supervillain, which is of course not correct. However," thanks. "If you think about it for just a moment, what superhero would you like to be your arch nemesis, to foil your plans, to beat you up and put you in jail just for you to start thinking about a new treacherous plan all over again?" I don't know. What rogues gallery would I really fit into? I'm often the supervillain of my own Magic the Gathering playgroup. Does that count? I suppose maybe I'd be a Batman or a Spider-Man villain, because self-preservation is very important to me and they aren't gonna kill me. It's a rule. And actually, no. If anyone knows superhero rules, it's me. Salamantis Poe says, "Hello, Kyle." Hi. "I'm trying to grow my hair out and love the look of your hair. What is your advice to someone who is growing out their hair? What is the best way to care for it? Thanks." Uh-oh. You know what that means. Another episode of Maintain. All right, so I said this a number of times, and this isn't super sciencey, but I think if we're just talking about if you're a dude, I don't know if you're a dude, but if you want to grow your hair out, we got to grow past wanting to look like we're in a high school band. That is, we focus on the length of the hair and not the maintenance of the hair itself. We got to get past this toxic machismo view of what long hair on men can be. You got to take control of it with the right shampoo, the right conditioner. Make sure you're using stuff that's actually high quality, that's not just drying your hair and your scalp out, getting rid of all of those oils. You don't want all of those oils out of there. Also, get regular haircuts. You don't want to just grow it out. You're going to get some dead ends. You're going to get some frazzle. You want to cut that off to maintain your hair as it grows out. You don't have to cut the whole thing off. It's like maintaining a hedge. You want to clip off some of the dead and dying parts of it. And also, swallow your pride and start blow drying your hair. You want your hair to look nice for a couple of days. It's not going to be accomplished through letting it air dry. If you let it air dry, you look like a scarecrow who someone stuffed hay into their hat. And your hair's gross. And if you look back into Because Science is History, first couple years, that's exactly what I look like. People tried to tell me, and I didn't listen. And now I look terrible on the internet forever. And that's because I wasn't maintaining, but you gotta maintain. This isn't your grade school talent show anymore. It's time to up your level. It's also genetics. If you don't have like really great genetics, it's not gonna work. Also argan oil, also product to put in your hair. You don't want to stumble across looking like a nice healthy sheen because you got greasy hair that looks like you've been in a basement for too long. You want to just very daintily apply some argan oil, one and only argan oil, which is the one and only argan oil that I use. Not a sponsor, but if they wanted to sponsor. But the nerdiest comment at the time I'm filming this episode, I gotta give to Sean Kangsier, who says, "Love the show, Kyle. Let's get theoretical. Don't you..." Yeah, legal disputes. Yeah, so I got this guy named Sean. He's definitely trying to rip off my catchphrase that I didn't rip off from Good Mythical Morning. Yeah. I don't know, 15 lawyers? I don't know, garnish his wages 25% for the rest of his life? Yeah, sounds reasonable. What? Let's get theoretical. Teleporting with a wave function, Sean says, is meaningless if you can also affect time. He could change time, walk to Mars, and then change time back, and he would, to us, appear to have teleported. Well, Sean, I didn't even think about this. Yes, if Dr. Manhattan can manipulate matter and time in the way that I'm suggesting, then he doesn't have to go through the admittedly very hard to do, very unlikely, very godlike ability of manipulating every single one of the wave functions for every single particle in his body such that he can teleport himself all the way to Mars like he's quantum tunneling. What would be easier is if Dr. Manhattan, with his omnipresence and omnipotence, and omnipotence, could just stop time and then leisurely make his way to Mars because time is meaningless to him, and then resume time for the rest of us, and it would appear as though he teleported and he wouldn't be breaking relativity or anything like that. So yeah, if Dr. Manhattan can control the flow of time, I guess that'd be the answer you want to go with. I didn't even think about that, and it's just as valid as anything that I said, because we're talking about a super being who can control the very sweater of reality, not fabric. I'm tired of that. So indeed, Sean, you are a super nerd. Ah! Ow, my upper arm hurts. You'll find out why at the end of the episode. But of course, I'm not always right. Apparently, the most commonly accepted and the correct pronunciation of sherbet is sherbet. What? What? People sell sherbet? You get sherbet ice cream? It's not sherbet? Really? I had no idea. Is this a Berenstain situation? I've been eating sherbet my whole life. And now it's sherbet? My life is a lie. I prefer ice cream. So what did I get wrong last week? Sherbet the frog. Hey there, Miss Piggy. Our first correction is the largest correction, which comes from a number of you, which isn't actually a correction, from Kieran and Balbirith and Bruno and John. You all say something like, well, couldn't Dr. Manhattan be glowing because of so-called Cherenkov radiation? Now, I don't blame anyone for thinking Cherenkov radiation is the culprit here. I have mentioned it before on the show, and it is basically like glowing blue light that you could see from a nuclear reactor starting up in water. That's the video that pretty much everyone has seen. Basically, it is energetic particles traveling through a medium faster than light does in that medium, and as a result, the air or the fluid, the particles get excited. When they de-excite, they emit photons and they glow. Why would Dr. Manhattan be producing Cherenkov radiation, though? He is not in water, and this is the important point. In water, light can slow down quite a bit to like 70 or 80% of c, the speed of light. So it doesn't take as much energy for a particle to go, 90% the speed of light in that same medium. When it does that, it creates this Cherenkov radiation. However, in air, which is 1,000 times less dense than water, to go faster than light does in air, you have to be basically going the speed of light. Light doesn't slow down very much in air, so it would take extremely energetic particles to create Cherenkov radiation in the air. And as a super nerd will point out, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So, while Cherenkov radiation could explain a blue glow of, say, a Dr. Manhattan if he was always underwater, in air, it's not quite the same phenomenon. I think ionizing the air around him makes a lot more sense. Deadpool himself, Wade Wilson, has a correction who says, Dr. Manhattan glows blue because he, quote, leaks electrons, as stated by Ozymandias in Doomsday Clock #1. Well, isn't that interesting? Leaking electrons, in my view, could be interpreted as a kind of beta radiation, because beta radiation is just electrons and or positrons flinging themselves about. And if those electrons are going on to hit other atoms and molecules in the air, they might ionize them and produce the air glow that we mentioned in the episode. So leaking electrons is a great reason why Dr. Manhattan would be blue. And then the whole Watchmen comic is therefore scientifically validated. David Hutchins has two corrections, and they're important ones. So when I mentioned Harry K. Doglian Jr. encountering that blue flash of light, that wave of heat, I said that the core of plutonium he was working with went critical. But that's not quite true. As David points out, it actually goes prompt critical, which would produce this excess amount of radiation, which could produce this blue flash and this heat. And Harry K. Doglian Jr. did not die of cancer per se. He died of extreme radiation poisoning, where all of his organs were failing, and it was a whole lot of absolutely terrible. I made it seem in the episode as though Harry K. Doglian Jr. was getting cancer like you see in the Watchmen canon, as is the hoax perpetrated on Dr. Manhattan. But that's not exactly what happened to him. I could have gone into more detail, but I didn't, so I left it out. This is a good correction. But the Demon Core and the story around it is fascinating, and I have written about it before, earlier in my career. So if you want to see a full episode about that whole story, it's fascinating. Let me know in the comments. Finielson says, excellent show. I'm curious about when Dr. Manhattan was atomized. Wouldn't he lose his memories, since those only exist because of the synapses inside our brains? Unless those synapses were somehow preserved, he'd forget everything. Which also begs the question, could he teleport with his memories intact? So I want to preface this by saying we do not know how consciousness works. We do not know why, if you put enough synapses, enough neurons in the right order and the right amount, why the feeling of you-ness seems to spring out of something that doesn't have a feeling of itself. We don't know that. But the scientific view of how teleportation could work and you could retain who you are and your memories would be that whatever is being teleported, say we had a Star Trek style teleporter, that teleporter would first scan the person down to their very quantum levels, like Dr. Manhattan has control over. And it would log the position, the momentum, the energy of every single particle in the body, and then it would disassemble the body and reassemble it in the exact same energy and momentum and quantum state and everything on the other side or somewhere else. Now, in theory, since all you are is matter, and that's kind of beautiful in and of itself, if we knew the exact position of everything inside you and we just took you apart and put you back together perfectly in the same way somehow, then in theory you would retain your memories, you would retain who you are. So when Dr. Manhattan disintegrates himself, I guess what he is doing is putting himself back together down to the quantum level in the exact same way he pulled himself apart, and then he would be the same person. This does beg the philosophical question, though. Are you the same person when you come back? Aren't you basically destroying yourself and then just making a new copy when you come back and you're not the same person anymore? Would you do it? Would you go into a Star Trek style teleporter if that's what was happening to you? I would. Makes no difference to me. The more Kyles, the better. Especially if the teleporter goes wrong and it splits off the beam and then one Kyle's teleported back onto the Starship Enterprise, but he has a mustache and he's evil. Yeah. I think that was an episode of Star Trek where there was two Rikers. Speaking of Rikers, Mr. Worf, status report. But the nerdiest correction at the time I'm filming this episode, I gotta give to already two-time super nerd Giggity Guy, who says, I feel like ionizing the air is a little too involved and too obviously destructive to be what's going on. People would notice problems a lot sooner if that were the case, rather than wondering years later if he might be giving people cancer. If he were ionizing the air, Dr. Manhattan would cause static shocks around him, possibly a noticeable smell or even taste in the air, like ozone, and he would be giving people cancer a lot sooner than years down the road. Giggity Guy goes on to say, however, if Dr. Manhattan were releasing Cherenkov radiation in air, which is much less dense than water, he would have to be releasing some extremely energetic particles, so much so that it would probably melt stuff around him. It would explain why he's blue and why he glows, but doesn't explain why he doesn't destroy everything around him, as he said. When you get right down to it, there aren't many explanations that we can come up with for why John would glow that wouldn't involve destroying everything around him or giving people cancer. At the end of the day, it may simply be he is blue because he wants to be. Well, Giggity Guy, as you've done in the past, you are absolutely right. It is hard to square John's blueness with the laws of physics because there would be some knock-on effects to emitting high levels of radiation or very energetic particles to cause this blue glow. Rule of thumb here, if you see anything that's glowing blue by itself, do not go near it. That's a Because Science tip. It's hard to make John glow blue without having other things be affected very visibly by his appearance. So there's not a great way to square it, but I think our science-y explanation still gets at the root of what may be going on. And hey, maybe he might be controlling his emitted particles in such a way that he wants to be blue, but he's not dangerous. I don't know. He can control the sweater of reality. But for pointing all that out, Giggity Guy, you are indeed now a 3-time super nerd. See? And now for this week's episode of Because Science. This week's episode is anime running actually faster? Oh, Naruto no or Naruto yes? That's right, in this week's episode of Because Science, we're going into the field and we are testing with stopwatches and a track and stuff how fast anime running actually is. You may have seen anime running tested on the internet before. I have too, but I have not seen it tested with a 6-time gold medal sprinter and relay racer. We got one of those, and the results are pretty interesting, so you're not going to want to miss this one. But before you see a very talented athlete do something very stupid, go watch the latest episode of Because Science, all about Dr. Manhattan's powers and how they might really work on the channel, and leave me all your comments and questions and corrections. Make sure they're nerdy. and put them on youtube.com/BecauseScience, Facebook.com/BecauseScience, and @BecauseScience on, I don't know, wherever those are. And don't forget, my arm hurts because I got my flu shot. You should get your flu shot. Even if you feel very healthy, even if you think you don't need it, you need it. When you get your flu shot, it helps herd immunity. So even if you won't get the flu because you're healthy, you are helping yourself not become a carrier and possibly transmitting the flu, influenza, to people who are much more at risk than you are. And even though the flu shot is not 100% effective, no vaccine is, even a 1% decrease in the amount of people or the amount of transmissions can literally save lives. And saving lives is worth a Band-Aid. Get it done.